Hi, I'm Tom Daley and welcome to the Lexington Writers Club. As a teacher at Lexington Community Education, it's been my pleasure to help Lexingtonians achieve their dream of bringing their thoughts and experiences to life on the page. On this show, we'll be interviewing some of those writers and we'll find out what it's like to get to be a writer. What are the pitfalls? What are the joys? And maybe in the process, you'll be inspired to write yourselves. So welcome to the show. My guest today is Irene Hannigan. Irene was in my Lexington Community Education memoir writing workshop. And when I found out that she had been a principal for a number of years, I got scared. You know what it's like. I'm sending you to the principal's office. Well, actually, it was quite a pleasure to work with Irene. She actually wrote a wonderful memoir called A Principal's Journey. The school is as my classroom. And we worked with some of the essays that ended up in that book. And today we're talking about her latest book, which is called Write On, How to Make Writing a Pleasurable Pastime. She's actually teaching a class at Lexington Community Education on that subject, but we'll get to that later on. So first of all, Irene, let me ask you, why, if writing isn't a pleasurable pastime, why should anybody do it?
What a good question. It's like it's an oxymoron, right?
Yeah.
A pleasurable pastime. For me, when I'm not trying to write a book or write an article or write something for a memoir class, and I'm just musing, I find that it is pleasurable in that it helps me to reflect on life, it helps me to be more observant, and because it is pleasurable for me, that's why I feel it's a pleasurable experience. I think when I'm teaching courses, it's a question that occurs to a lot of people, and it's if it's not going to be pleasurable to you for some reason other than publishing, and I don't think that is the major goal for me, then nobody is going to want to do it. But I really still believe, you can contradict me if you'd like, which you might do, that there's a lot of advantages. When I was a busy principal, I had a date with myself to go to a coffee shop once a week to just, it wasn't a blow-by-blow description of what I had experienced, because some of it I didn't want to relive, but it was very settling. It made time to have a conversation with myself, and that was good because we get very busy in our lives, and so I find it satisfying.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I'm assuming that people who think about writing or wanting to write have something to say. Mm-hmm. And they want to tell a story, or they want to work out an argument, or they want to express their opinion. But it isn't fun for everybody. For some people, it's like pulling teeth. William Butler Yeats, for example, the Irish poet, his sister said he would close the door, and when he was writing, he would scream and yell and moan and groan. But he turned out some of the best poetry that was written in the 20th century by somebody writing in English. So writing isn't a pleasurable pastime for everybody. And what your book actually does is helps people, in my opinion, to make it a pleasurable pastime. One of the things that you talk about for writers getting started is called the free write. Do you want to talk about that?
Sure, and that's not really my idea, but it's Peter Elbow's idea. And he maintains that it's the easiest way to get ideas down on paper. So free writing means you put your pencil on the paper or your pen or whatever you're using, and you just follow it wherever it's going to go. And I've used it with children, even in schools. I used to be a teacher in elementary school, and a lot of children will say, I don't have anything to write. So you say to them, so you just write, I don't have anything to write, until your brain refuses to write that. And eventually you will come up with something more interesting than I don't have anything to write. So I find that free writing is the first thing I do when I'm teaching a course, to try to let people experience what it feels like to just let your pen go and to just follow wherever your pen is going to go. Some people who are more used to more professional writing don't even think that's writing. But I think for people, especially people who are just starting out, I think it's a great way of releasing.
So what do you mean when you say let it go wherever it's going to go? You mean if you start doodling?
No, not to, well, I don't know. I mean, now that I've started drawing, I mean, I think that this is kind of a good thing to do, to tell you the truth. But to not have any preconceived notion of what you're going to write. And what happens is, I'm assuming the people I've been working with have something in their mind, you know, and especially if you're walking or, you know, and if you know that you're going to do some free writing, sometimes what happens to me is as I'm on the way to a coffee shop and I know I'm going to write, probably those ideas are kind of swirling around in my head.
Well, when you're free writing, are there parameters? For example, do you say fill up a page or write for 2 minutes, or do you have any suggestions about that?
Well, when I teach my course, because I'm about trying to help people establish some routines that are satisfying, I say write for 5 minutes.
Okay.
And they're amazed at how much you can write for 5 minutes. And when I begin a course and end a course, I usually do a lot of free writing because I want people to reflect on how they're doing. So the first question I'll say is, so how's your writing life been this week? And, you know, some people will say, oh, I haven't been doing it, so you write it down. I'm hoping by the 5th week, you know, maybe you will have done something.
All right, well, let's talk about writing practice, because that's a big part for you about turning writing into something pleasurable. So you, for a long time, went to a donut shop, a coffee shop?
Gale Ann's.
And where is that?
In Arlington.
In Arlington. Gale Ann's? Is that
Gale Ann's.
It's still there?
Yeah, it's still there. It's under it's changed ownership a couple of times. It's right across from the Regent Theater.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
so
nobody knows me there.
So you went there every Saturday?
Every Saturday.
For how long?
Oh my gosh, all the while I was working just about.
Yeah. So why did you go there instead of holing up in a closet in your house? Or
well, I found I do different kinds of writing in different places. So if I'm writing in my writer's notebook or I'm writing in a journal, it's maybe once a week that I would do that. And going there and writing, it gives me, that's what I'm going to be doing. I'm going to do it as long as it takes me to drink a cup of coffee. And in 45 minutes, I will have something, and it's either a journal reflection or a free write. And usually it's, and if I'm working on something, when I was working on Write On, lots of times I would be thinking about what I'm going to be writing about in the chapter, and that would help me, you know, get a head start. Sometimes when I'm at home, I get really distracted. And in fact, that was one of the questions that somebody asked at the book launch. They said, how come I can go to Panera to write and I'm not writing at home? And part of it is you have a lot of distractions at home.
Absolutely.
And I try to make this be a priority. So my house is neat, but it's not always clean.
So you're in the coffee shop and you're writing, and aren't there distractions there? Or don't the things going on in the coffee shop? I know I try to write sometimes in a library that's, one of the branch libraries near me in Cambridge is very busy. And it's one room, so you can hear everything. It's a delightful place, but I mean, I just find I start listening to the conversations rather than doing what I came to write. How do you?
Well, no, when I was working on Write On, I always worked at home. At my desk. Because I knew I didn't always know what I was doing, but that was a project, and that was what I kept on working on day after day after day. Not all day, but a couple of hours until I didn't know what else to do, and then I would take a walk. But writing in a coffee shop sometimes is useful, because lots of times I would overhear the conversations. I mean, that's about keeping a writer's notebook, right? And I wrote I thought was a pretty funny piece about something that I observed at...
Was that the one with the butter on
crumb cakes?
On the crumb cake? Yeah, that's a funny story.
And that really was the way it happened.
You have to read the book to get the story. It's a fun story.
Thank you, Tom.
So, Eudora Welty, you know, the short story writer, she once said, one of the worst things about getting old is you can no longer overhear other people's conversations.
Oh, my gosh.
And, you know, I think overhearing other people's conversations is a great way to kind of find inspiration for something.
Yeah.
All right, so now you have another technique called the word photo. You want to talk about that?
Right, and I don't know if I somebody asked me, "Did you invent that?" And I said, "I have no idea. I should Google
We'll talk
it."
about the genesis, the guy, the grandfather, and...
Oh yeah. No, what happened was I was at my writing group that I've been meeting with for a number of years, and a woman said, "I have a New Year's resolution. I'm going to take a photograph every single day." And of course, to pacify me, she said, and maybe I'll do a little writing off the photographs, you know. I said, "Oh, that's an interesting idea." And she lined us up and she said, "This is going to be my photo for the day." So I kept on thinking about the connection between photography, and I am not a photographer. But it does make you more observant. And the people I know who are photographers, and my friend Edie said this, that when she has her camera in her hand, she's more observant. I've seen the photographs that you do. And you know, they're beautiful. And it's because you're observing things that people would just not even notice. So I got to thinking about a word photo, and I said, well, I'm not going to take a photograph, but I do have my pen in my hand, and I'm going to just snap a picture of something that I see. And it doesn't have to be, I'm not going to be wandering all over trying to find something. I'm going to just, something that attracts my attention for some reason. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to make a caption. And initially it was just a sentence because I just wanted to just get it done. And then I would just write a couple of sentences about that. I loved this idea. And I thought if I were to do it all over again, I wish I had started that early on, because it was a wonderful way almost of keeping a very simple diary that was not burdensome to read because it wasn't all that much. And I am doing something like that with sketching. So I keep a sketch one day and I do some writing another day, because I think there's a connection between writing and sketching.
Absolutely.
And photography, whatever. So that's how the word photo came in. Of all the things that I mention in my courses, people like that idea. It fulfills, kind of the need to have, it's not a prompt, you're making up the prompt yourself, it's forcing you to be more observant. And you're just writing a little bit about something that you sometimes can go back to, and that can be the kernel of a larger idea. Mm-hmm. It also connects to this other thing that when I say I'm glad I published a couple of books and articles, but having a gift of words is really important to me. And I think the anecdote that I've sometimes told is that when I was doing a word photo notebook, which was, kind of every single day for a whole year, it was the year that my sister died, and I didn't know she was going to die. I didn't know I was going to get cancer, same disease, a couple of months later. So I put together a collection of short word photos that were about my sister when she came to my mind throughout that year. And it was a very nice remembrance of her that I had the year following her death. So the word photos play into this idea of a gift of words that I think is useful.
I think also it probably helps train people to think of writing as capturing images.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I think the image, so many people have trouble getting this, which is they think that they can't talk about an image because that's something specific to their own experience. They need to speak in terms that are, abstract concepts like peace or love or justice or friendship or envy, and that's the thing that's going to interest people. But people are actually much more interested in things they can access with their five senses.
Yes.
So if you tell them, write a word photo, they're thinking, oh, I've got to capture something like a photo, like a camera does.
Yeah.
Something that's going to hopefully capture, the imagination through accessing sight or taste or, sound, smell, for example, is a very important sense.
And right now, I want to challenge myself to make my word photos. I don't even want to use not more literally, but I want to be using my senses more when I'm capturing the word photos. I'm taking a course right now from one of your students, Kristen Worcester, and her whole thing is to come up with a snapshot of something. Okay, so it's not a word; it's a snapshot. And this is memoir-like because she's been influenced by you. We've all been influenced by you, And it's I can see her struggling. Well, not struggling, but her goal is to try to help the people in the class, just like you helped the people in the class that I was taking from you, focus on an event and see what you can get out of that event. You know, so I guess the word photo is a smaller way of doing that.
Yeah,
You know?
no,
Yeah.
you actually taught a class on word photos,
Yeah,
right? Through Lexington Community Education.
Yes.
So there's a place, I want to get to a lot of people come to the writing workshops that I lead, and they're rather hesitant to talk about things that are painful, that are difficult. And you know, a lot of them say they're writing for their family, they don't want to offend anybody.
Yeah.
I certainly can understand that, but I also say to them, don't write right now for your family. Write for yourself. And in my memoir workshops, we have a rule: you can't talk about anything that's discussed in the workshop outside of the workshop unless somebody gives you their permission to do that. So just write for the workshop, and don't worry about, you know, don't have somebody hanging over your shoulder. Now you wrote, I think it's on page 21 of the book, reasons not to write about things. Could you just read that part for us? Because I thought that was very instructive.
Sure, and I have the whole chapter is what are you worried about, right?
Right.
Okay,
Yeah.
so this was, this must have been, yeah. It says, if I'm honest with myself, which I'm going to try to be this morning, so this was part of a writer's notebook thing, I realize that I often won't let my pen take me wherever it wants to go. I know I'm fearful of writing about my younger sister's tragic and tumultuous life that ended at the age of 57. I've never written very much about my father, perhaps because of so many regrets I have about our relationship that had so many unresolved issues. And then there's my mom, who's still with me 9 years after her death. I've certainly written about her, but I also censor my efforts more times than I would like to admit. If I were more of a, quote, real writer, I'd consider these darker sides of my life the raw material for a good short story or even a novel. But somehow, going there as the kind of writer I am feels like I'm using writing as therapy. Perhaps I'm not ready yet to get involved in a therapeutic relationship with myself. Am I afraid of where my writing will take me? Am I afraid of who might read my words someday? And I have to say, Tom, that now that I'm writing this, I just recently did write something about my father, and something that I did that I thought was rather hurtful to him. And
But he's not still alive.
no, he's not.
Yeah.
But he's still with me in a way that I wouldn't have believed, because we really had some rough times.
So is it something that you would ever publish? Would you ever consider publishing it?
Well, it was actually, it turned out, I need to say this to a poet, but it was kind of like a little poem. It was a poem. But it was, I'm using my poems to flesh out an idea that I don't think it would work as something longer. Maybe it will eventually.
Do you know Robert Lowell's book, Life Studies?
No.
So those are all poems about his family. And
Really?
he has a lot of, they're very frank, observations about his relationships with his parents, with his grandparents, with other relatives. It's very, very powerful poetry. He has a poem about his father dying in Beverly Farms, and he's just very blunt. He says, my father's last words were, "I feel awful." He was an old Boston Brahmin. Anyway, he has a wonderful poem called My Last Afternoon with Uncle Devereaux Winslow. And he's imagining himself as 5 years old, and his uncle is dying of Hodgkin's disease. And they're at his grandparents' kind of estate someplace. It's a very, very, it's a lot of images about what a 5-year-old kid would see and think, but then he kind of superimposes on it some of the things that are happening with his uncle and his grandparents. But it's very frank, incredibly frank.
I will look at that.
Yeah.
I definitely will take a look at that.
Yeah.
Maybe because I really do feel, never say never, the older I get, the more I think, well, why not? Why am I here? Why not, right?
Yeah. So let's talk about the class you're teaching, which is based on this book. It's also called How to Make
Writing a Pleasurable Experience, not an oxymoron.
So how are you going to run this class?
Okay, so the first, this is the second time I'm doing it, beginning May 1st. So I just did one, and
Before we forget, May 1st, which is what?
It's a Wednesday. From 1 to 3.
1 to 3. You can register at Lexington Community Education.
Yes, okay. So the first, after I kind of get to know people initially, we talk about the first 4 sessions really go through introducing them to free writing as a strategy.
So you actually do it in class?
Yeah, we do it, and I expect that they're going to read the chapter. I've been having them read the chapter after I've done some.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's just a little different. I didn't do that the same way when I did it at the Osher Center, but and they like this approach. So, and then I bring in some free writing notebooks that I have, just so that they know they can be somewhat mundane affairs, but they can be more sophisticated. I feel people hold themselves to appropriately high standards, but sometimes you don't want them to be paralyzed either. So we do free writing initially, and then I expect that the week that that they have that they're going to continue to do some free writes. Then I introduce them to the idea of taking a word photo, and so then that week I want them to try to start snapping a couple of word photos in their environment and not obsessing about the best word photo. Just get it down, So just. Then I talk about a writer's notebook, how to start thinking like a writer. So if you go to a coffee shop, kind of overhear conversations. If you're looking at environmental print, what catches your eye, and start jotting those things down. So you're not necessarily writing a whole free write in the notebook. You're really capturing things that you see, and it can be just snippets of just perceptions that you have. If you're taking a walk, sometimes you can come up with a line that could translate into a poem or something like that. Yeah. And then we talk about journal writing too. For me, the journal is, I've gone through lots of different ways of keeping journals, and now my journal is just a once, maybe twice a month affair. And it holds me accountable for how I'm spending my days, which is how you spend your life, right? Somebody said that. And it's a commonplace book journal. Then so those are the 4 strategies that I want people to experiment with to see whether one of those resonates with them that might make writing more pleasurable. You always get people in the class, which I understand, that want to do something with their writing, So that's when I start talking about reading like a writer. So, and reading pieces that are short enough. Everybody wants to write a novel. I don't think everybody's capable of writing a novel but I think people are capable of writing a shorter human interest kind of a story or an anecdote or, even writing the memoirs or that we've done in your classes, those are a lot more sophisticated as well. So something a little bit easier than that. And that's why I have some samples in the back of my book. And I kind of say, well, if you think that these aren't that great and you could do it, then sit down and do it, So I ask them to look at their free writes, look at some of their journal entries, look at something that they've been writing just to kind of warm up, and see whether they could translate that or transform it into something more coherent. So we both read examples of shorter pieces that people have written, and then have them at the end of the class write something of their own, and that's been successful.
Sounds like a great class.
Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit about your book, Off to School: A Parent's Eye View of the Kindergarten Year. This is a book that Irene published through
National Association for the Education of Young Children. Okay. It's a mouthful.
Okay.
Yeah.
And this is available on Amazon?
It is, There were 10,000 copies that were printed, and people still buy it.
All right, so one of the things that intrigued me was that this started as letters to your son, Ted, but weren't there also letters, to Mrs. Yardley?
Yes.
So there are letters to his teachers, right? And that's how the book got started and got finished. So it's a collection of thoughts and observations on Ted's experience and your experience, and also communications with the teachers.
Right, and it didn't start out being a book. It started out in 3, kind of small notebooks. And when my husband, I confessed to him that I was writing letters to Ted, he said, "What?" And then, but there were letters that weren't going to be delivered. It helped me stay grounded, not be a pain in the neck, parent.
Yeah.
I fell in love with Mary Yardley, who now retired and is one of my very, very good friends. And initially, when I gave her, I told her that I thought I wanted to do this. You know, I was doing this all year, and then her newsletters would come home, and they were more than just run-of-the-mill newsletters like I would churn out. And you know, the long story short is I put it together, and I wanted to give it to her as a thank you present.
Right.
And I still remember meeting her at another coffee shop in Concord, and she went like this, and she said, "This is a thank you present for me." And then I gave it to some other people, and that's when people said, you know, maybe it would be more than a thank you present to the teacher.
Right.
And that's when this organization, you know, you have to find the right place at the right time.
Right.
It's like looking for a needle in a haystack.
Right.
But this woman, Carol Koppel, was the editor, and she wanted to make it be something about teacher communication, teacher-parent communication. That's not how I envisioned it at first. So all the narrative in there.
The project changed.
It
morphed.
changed, yeah. It morphed into something much better. And then, of course, it was published when my son was in 4th grade. And then they wanted illustrations, and then he had to get in on it you're not going to put that in there, are you, Mom? Too many hearts, you know?
Well, there's a wonderful story in Right On about how you gave, when Ted graduated from high school, you gave him a book of letters that you'd written and photographs you'd taken, and your husband wasn't sure whether he would appreciate it, but he just loved it. He was really fascinated by it. So I mean, it's, you know, relatives don't always respond so well to writing stuff, but in your case, he was absolutely thrilled. And it was interesting that you said he was interested first in the photographs, but then he got interested in the writing.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, we actually have only a couple of minutes, so couple of things to say. First of all, your class starts on May 1st. People can register through Lexington Community Education through the website, or you can call them. The second thing is you are doing a talk about your book at the Carey Memorial Library in Lexington on what day is that?
Well, that's going to be Tuesday, May 21st from 2 to 3:30, and I'm excited about that because it'll just be a little different. It's not a course. It's going to be part presentation, part workshop. So I am actually going to help people understand two of the strategies that I do in the book. So that might be fun too. Yeah.
And I just want to make a plug for a class that I'm teaching, which is going to be the first Friday in June, just a 2-hour workshop called Strategies for Publishing in Journals and Magazines, both online and in print. And we're going to talk about all the different techniques that one can use in getting things in print. Have you ever taken that class?
No, I haven't. I haven't. Yeah.
Anyway, you've been very successful. Congratulations on the new book, and I hope that your reading at the library goes well. Is there anything you want to say just to finish off?
Well, I just can't tell you how much I'm appreciative of all you have done for me. Right from the first time when I retired and I was working on that, you helped me to understand that a memoir is a slice of your life, and that's what that was, a good transition for me. Good. And I do think it was. I tried to run the school like a teacher, not an administrator.
Yeah, no, it's a fascinating
And
book.
Now that I'm doing a little teaching myself, I'm longing to get back to your memoir classes because you are kind of on my shoulder when I'm writing.
No, it's a little scary.
No.
Well, I want to just say one thing, then we'll wrap this up. Irene came to the workshop writing rather abstractly, professionally, writing as if she were writing reports. And I said, no one's going to be interested in this as a collection, except a few academics, unless you tell stories. You got to tell the story. And you learned to do that brilliantly.
I did, and it made it so much more fun. I mean, in fact, do we have any more time? No, we don't have any time?
That's probably it.
All right, that's it.
Just one more thing.
No, I was going to say, in my writing group that I started when I published Off to School, I wanted it to be for professional writing. I wanted to, because I was used to writing articles for magazines. And it was clear that I was the only one in the group who wanted to do that. Everybody else wanted to write anecdotes, memories, and that's what we did. And the group would not have lasted for 20 years if we'd been doing the other kind of writing. Yeah. So there is a lot to be said about writing stories.
That's great that you've had same writing group 20 years, right? Is it 2 or 3 people been there the whole time?
Probably about 6 have been there the whole time.
That's amazing.
And there's now 8, and one time it got to be 12, it was too much. But now there's about 6 hearty souls who come, maybe 6 to 8.
Anyway, strongly recommend that you get a copy of Right On. by Irene Hannigan, How to Make Writing a Pleasurable Pastime. And thank you again for your time.
Thank you very much, Tom.